You guys can see that okay? First page?
Mhm. Yes,
Awesome.
sir.
All right. Well, I'm just going to kind of go through this and throw out questions if you have them. So this is the webinar we're doing for ELLI, and it's the class is called Warranty Information or Understanding Warranties. And I thought this was important because a lot of people don't really read into warranties much. They may look at them initially and then just kind of forget about them, but there's a lot to consider on this, whether if you're the contractor, especially whether you're just a designer or a design build contractor, you still have to a lot of times work with contracts. You have to write up your own contract. And what is it that you're going to do to protect yourself with the client or the customer? And that's under the contractor warranty information. So like what's your guarantee to the customer so that they know you have to have that somewhere stated. And that's usually in the agreement or the contract up front. Manufacturer warranties, we're going to talk about this in a second too, but it's that's on the products themselves, and every manufacturer may have something a little bit different. And we're going to look at both of these things today. So that's the premise of this course. So then that way there's better understanding. Okay. So what are the two basic types of warranties? There's, like I just mentioned, the manufacturer warranty, which is a material warranty. It covers defects and issues that arise from the materials that we use. Contractor's warranty is a workmanship warranty. Um, Typically for contractors, what you'll see, and there people will have different opinions on this, but the standard I think out there that everybody's using is a 1 year warranty by contractors for workmanship. That's usually the standard for, well, most all contracting businesses. You can go higher. I mean, I used to do where I do a 3 or 5 year warranty, workmanship warranty, and then because I thought, well, maybe that'll give me a competitive advantage over my competition. Just if they're only doing 1 year, I'm going to do a 3 or 5 or a 10 year, But the challenge comes into play. I stopped doing that. And I just kept it simplistic and went back to the 1 year because you'll find that there's a lot of unknowns, things that you cannot control on projects that aren't your fault. It's not really a workmanship issue, but it's an issue related to damages, weather issues, whatever it is that will come into play. And then do you really want to get into any kind of legal battle with the customer over that if you're charging for those repairs? Now, in all the years that I've been doing this, I really have never had any problems with my customers. Once you've built a relationship and they trust you, then they're not going to really, they'll know that's what's real and what's not real. If it's, their daughter drove over the path light and broke it, it's pretty obvious. And they're not going to say, well, it's poor workmanship. No, it's poor product. No, the car's heavyweight. That's what I'm talking about. So you're not going to really run into these problems too much, but it's just good to have them. You have to explain what they are on the contract up front, so then that way there's no questions down the road. Warranty limitations. And again, these are the conditional terms that exist. So what conditions limit the warranty? We were just talking about a little bit of that, but you might look at, how is the product used? How is it serviced and maintained? One of the big things that I try to tie into my actual warranties is that I want my company to maintain these systems. So I engage with them to have an annual, at least an annual service maintenance program with me so that I can maintain it and I can always keep it looking good. And then that way I know what's going on with the system. If somebody else works on the system, then I say that to me, that's a no-go. I don't want anybody messing with my projects, even if they're half the price as me, Once they do that, I typically, and I'll have this stated in my warranties, is that if anybody else works on the system, even if it's the homeowner, then they own the system. They void the warranty package with me. So, is it worth doing that for them? And most people would say no. I want, they know what they're doing. Let's let them take care of it, and that's the best way to go. Now, we talked about acts of God. You'll see in a lot of contracts, most manufacturers, most contractors, everybody will have this terminology in there. This is a legal thing where things that are considered acts of God, we can't control when those things happen. Inclement weather, it could be, acts of terrorism, acts of war. I mean, they got all kinds of things that are typically listed. If you do some research on contractual law, or insurance, look at your insurance policy. This is a perfect place to look. You'll see all of this type of stuff listed in there, and they use that to protect themselves so they're not liable for things that they cannot control. So protecting yourself, again, if we understand what the terms and conditions are, those should be written out somewhere. I have an example I'll show you coming up that I used to give each of my customers like a little warranty page on what's covered. What is it with the manufacturer of the products? What is it with the workmanship? And the extended warranty, which is the service maintenance package, what's covered under that. So you try to list out these things so that it's clear and easily understood. Now, the more you can specify these terms and conditions, the better off you're going to be at if you ever end up in some sort of legal battle with somebody. You want to ensure that the contract contains clear language that's absolving the contractor or designer of any responsibility for the accuracy, correctness, or code acceptability of the design. I did that because this is primarily a design program that we're talking about here. You want to cover yourself as much as you can. So the more that you can list all these things out up front, like I'd mentioned, the better off you're going to be. Exclusions. Anything that's listed on a contract or an agreement, if you list them as what's excluded, then that will help to cover you too. It relieves you from that responsibility. Remember I'd mentioned here, I've got a bullet point that says alterations to the work not performed by the contractor, because this happens a lot. Again, I charge a certain amount. Some of the customers, they don't want to pay that amount for maintenance. They think it's too high. And I've got my landscape guy that can do it for, $20 an hour. Well, if they do it and then they screw up everything, they're responsible for that. So you want to make sure that you somehow explain that or list that in your agreements. Abuse or damage to the work caused by third parties. Again, who's going to pay for that? You shouldn't have to be responsible for anything that's done by somebody else. Okay, there's a couple warranty terms that are used. You'll hear express warranty and you'll hear implied warranty. We're going to talk about both of those. So the first one here, what is an express warranty? It's a stated guarantee that the product will meet a certain level of quality and reliability. So the manufacturer will have this expressed. It's a real basic listing that they'll talk about. And then they a lot of times go into many more details on it, but that's the express part of the warranty. If you can do express warranties verbally or in written form. And the problem always comes up when it's expressed verbally is like, how can you prove that? You can't really. So although sometimes they can be held up in court, it's always best have everything in writing. So that way it's a done deal. There's no questioning it. Like, well, he told me this. Well, verbal doesn't hold up to writing. So Written warranties must contain specific terms, how long the coverage lasts. Is it a 1 year workmanship warranty, 5 year warranty on the LED, the LEDs that you're using? So you just have everything listed or have it somewhere that they know what it is, at the time that you're doing your deal with them. And then whether it's a full warranty or a limited warranty. Most everything today, I think most everybody has a limited warranty. I don't know too many companies that are giving full warranties no matter what. Do you guys know of any that you're working with that might do that? I don't, in landscape lighting. I know, Samuel, you're still, pretty new, but I don't know. I haven't really come across it yet. Most everybody's using a limited, and for
Yeah,
good
that's what I
reason.
see is limited. Yeah.
Yeah. So that way then you have to look at, well, what is limited, and then you have to find that, and that's in their warranty, the disclosure that we're going to look at coming up. I show several examples of that.
Mhm.
So an implied warranty is that it doesn't need to be a clear statement from the manufacturer or seller. It's just implied that if you're buying a light fixture to illuminate something, the implied part is you're assuming it's going to work when it comes out of the box and do the job that it's stated it's supposed to do. So that's kind of what an implied warranty is. And by federal law, there's two different types of implied warranties: merchantability and fitness. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But also, I added this note, this bullet point here where I talk about design. If you think about it as lighting designers, it's implied that we are supposed to know all the laws and codes and acceptable practices for the systems that are being installed. Does that make sense? Because you're assuming, okay, I'm hiring this company, whether you work for the company that's installing it or you're a separate designer, as a separate entity. The customer's assuming that you know what you're doing, and that's why they're hiring you to install the job. Or, well, not to install, but to provide the design for the job to be installed. So along with that, it's implied that you understand what are the current laws, what are their current codes, the acceptable practices used to install that. So that's where it can get a little tricky if you're a new designer, work very closely with the builder, make sure he or she knows what they're doing. And there's a way that, I don't know if, again, I do everything myself. So I'm both designer and installer. So I do it all, and I have my own contractor's license for that. But there are separate people that do it, independently. And I would be curious to find out with the designers only, um, if I'm sure they have a separate contractor and an arrangement with the contractor to protect themselves, where it's disclosed on the design that the contractor is responsible for X, Y, and Z or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I
again,
see that a lot on like theatrical designs, which is where I do a lot of my work as well. And
yeah,
there's always like a little thing in the drawing at the bottom that says like these are artistic concepts only, like, production company or installer, whoever is responsible for like adherence to local codes and building
right.
building
Yeah,
practices, all that. Yeah.
absolutely. Good. No, that's a great point. And that's a way to kind of get around it. At least then, and that way it's listed on there. Make sure you have that so for your own protection, and they don't try to point the finger back at you where, well, I knew it wasn't right, but that was designed this way, so we installed it that way. Then it can get real tricky, and when it comes to court, if there's a major problem, who the contractor still most likely be held accountable for it because they should know better and they installed it. But, you know,
I think
good.
something that's going to be, I mean, thinking about um, like compliance and stuff, like now as it seems like from what I hear, like municipalities and stuff are starting to like lean more into like the dark sky preservation stuff and like stricter being stricter about, you know, uplighting and stuff like that. So it's like for a long time it was like nobody really cared what we were doing, but it seems like it's getting to a point where
Yeah.
on certain size projects, like there are gonna be people who are going to be paying attention, you know, people on like, you know, the code enforcement department who are going to be paying attention to what's being put in the ground versus, you know, before it was just like a free for all for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're right on that. I mean, most residential, it can remain kind of a little more quiet, a little more private, where people aren't going to get involved so much unless there's a landscape architect or a big team. Or let's say it's a big estate project. But commercial, for sure, I would think there's going to be a lot more oversight like this to where you're going to want protection for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Excellent. So here, remember I told you about an example. This was something I pulled this from my files. It was back in 2011, I think. So it's an old one. It's not really updated, but you can see here, this was my basic handout, what I would give to people. So Avalon Lighting Design, that's my company, you know, guarantees work for a period of, there's my term, 3 years on workmanship. So that's the workmanship side of it. And then, however, vandalism, acts of God, inclement weather, war conditions, any other unforeseeable conditions beyond the control of the contractor are not covered. So there it's written out, it's listed, and hopefully that'll cover the majority of issues that may arise. And then you start breaking it down, warranty limits, okay, the limitations on that. And I'm just going to kind of read through it. I know it might be a little dry, but I think this will help us to pull out parts of this to explain better. So the liability of the contractor for defective materials or installations is hereby limited to the replacement or correction of such defect and or installation. You'll find this a lot with even manufacturer warranties. They will only cover or replace the products. They'll fix it or replace it. They won't cover labor, your labor time, if it's out in the field for the most part. Some companies may, but for the majority, they've now started listing all this where they exclude that, to where as a contractor, if you're installing this and something goes wrong and it's a product failure, then they'll replace the product, which is good, but it doesn't cover your time. So now, do you just eat that as a contractor, or do you charge your customer for this replacement time? And is it their fault? See, so these are questions you have to ask yourself. I typically will eat it, depending on the scenario of what, if there was a problem. But there's other times where I may be replacing parts and things, and then I have it lumped into my labor of my annual maintenance services, to where then I'm really getting accounted for it anyways. But these are things that will pop up if you have faulty products, and then who's going to cover that labor if you're doing it? So no other claims or demands whatsoever shall be made upon or allowed against the contractor. The limited warranty extends only to the owner of the lighting system in this case, and is transferable for the period specified. A lot of times you'll see in warranty situations here, I've seen this on manufacturer warranties where the products are only warranted to the original owner. So like if you sell the home, or they sell the home in the next year, it's not transferable to the next owner. So these are questions to ask, or to try to determine, you know, if you're using that product line, you know, whoever gets the new system, just be aware of things like that. There is no implied warranty of merchantability or implied warranty of fitness. Remember we talked about that? These are implied warranties. So if you look up here, the implied warranty of merchantability. This means the product will work on a fundamental level. It must be the general trade standards for such goods. That's what an implied merchantability warranty of merchantability is. And then the implied warranty of fitness, this means a product will work for a particular purpose that differs from what the manufacturer intended to be its original purpose.
What would an example of that be?
Oh, well, it's a great question. What that typically means is, let's say you buy an uplight and you decide to use it in the tree as a downlight. Well, the intended original purpose was as an uplight to where rain's going to wash down. It may not be sealed properly to be turned the opposite direction to where water can get inside the fixture and therefore cause problems. That would be or maybe it's a well light that, although well lights are more or less the same as an underwater light, maybe they're being used as an underwater light or it's submerged. You know, there are situations like these that come up, or some contractors will use different fixtures for different purposes than what they originally intended. So if something goes wrong with them, can they realistically replace them? You know, if they get questioned from the manufacturer, well, how was it used? You know, because a lot of times they're going to ask you what happened, you know, how did you use this product? You know, they'll even get into much deeper detail that you'll see at the end of this presentation, where they may go, well, how many volts was going to the fixture? Because there's a stipulation. You'll see this under the Kichler warranty where they say they give you a 5% variant. I think it is. We'll see coming up, to where if you look at, okay, well, we'll talk about that later. That's a little more detail, and I want to show you that slide for that. But there are situations like that. So that's what the implied warranty of fitness, like what was it originally, its original purpose? What was it supposed to be used for? So I did in this one here, there is no implied warranty of merchantability or implied warranty of fitness for any particular purpose. That's what I did in mine. However, I might change that now to where I might say the implied warranty of merchantability, just for general purposes, but still I do like this implied warranty of fitness, where now I'm not going to include that. So you can make those types of choices if you wish.
So what does that mean, like when you say that it's not included in your, like, what sort of,
like warranty limits? So like if they say in this case, well, you use yeah, because I'm given this really should be just for my use. Well, let me think about this. Because this was way back when I first got going. I was about 10 years in, but I just plugged all these things in. I didn't really think a lot of detail about warranties back in those days. You know,
have somebody doing webinars to teach you about them.
well, exactly. You know, so you're like, oh, well, you know, when you start thinking about these things and reading into them, then you may question them differently. But I just threw that in. It was I got a lot of this information off of through the contractors board here in our state in California. They supply all these detailed legal forms on these things that you include for contractual purposes. So I pulled a lot of this information off of there. I don't know if that helps answer that question, but I just left it as there's no implied warranty for merchantability or fitness. In this case, it should be used as intended by what was established by the manufacturer. There are no warranties, either expressed or implied, which extend beyond the description contained in this paragraph. This warranty shall terminate 3 years from the date of final inspection. So like when you do your final walkthrough with a customer, date of completion of the job, whichever is sooner. Again, just kind of legal jargon there, but it defines the terms that are established. And then I have here, owner is responsible for any damage to the lighting systems caused by any means other than normal wear and tear. You'll find that term used a lot, normal wear and tear. What is considered just acceptable, scratches and, exposure to, human traffic, whatever it is. So remember I used that example earlier, like I've had this happen a couple times where the daughter, ran over the path lights with a car, and not that they were trying to get any warranty from that, but that's just an example. That's not normal wear and tear. This would include damages such as physical or chemical damages. I throw that in because, physical, obviously, like we just talked about, maybe it's foot traffic, maybe it's contractor or other service providers on the job site, pest control people, pool service guys, whatever it is, right? Chemical damages, that would be something like, again, pesticides, fertilizer spraying, any kind of chemicals that maybe it's whatever, even pool granules, like if they throw those all over the fixtures, the chlorine, it's different nowadays, but back in the old days, I mean, they used to pour chemicals, right next to the pool, into the pool, and throwing granules, and not that it's gonna get, hold on to the fixture, but if it did and it caused pitting or acid buildup or whatever the case may be, that's not normal. Guarantees and warranties are effective only if owner has completed or complied with all terms and conditions in the original agreement. I threw that in because, again, I always include maintenance, annual routine maintenance that the client should be doing to keep the system up. They can't expect to have a warranty coverage if they never have you back to service the system to make sure it's operating properly, make sure it's cleaned properly, and that there's no other issues going on with it. So I'd throw that in there just as a backup measure to where if they try to get me to, well, it's not working. Well, you haven't had me out to do any maintenance for the past 5 years. How do I know what's happened? Who's worked on the system? Who's, what's happened? So again, added protection for yourself. I had a section in here about lamps. Back in the old days when we were using halogen lamps, incandescent lamps, you remember there's no real warranty that were on those towards what's the longevity of those bulbs. So I would say lamps should have no warranty whatsoever, as none are available from the manufacturer. Back then, they didn't really give a warranty on them. They said they should last X amount of hours, but you never really knew. And it's kind of still that same thing with LEDs today, but the LEDs are a lot better, obviously. And I think most of the manufacturers for retrofit LEDs are, and even integrated, I think it's 5 years now is what everybody's using. Some may be 4 or 3, some may even go up to 10, but I think the majority are using 5. And let's see, manufacturer's warranty, all lighting equipment has its own specified manufacturer's warranty. I didn't specifically call it out here, like saying 10-year warranty, limited warranty. You can if you're using a single product. If you're using multiple products, like I used to do, then it makes it too complicated to throw it all in here. I just would give them a separate thing or list it on my contract specifically saying you're using whatever it is, FX Luminaire, you've got a 10-year warranty, from the manufacturer. And then the extended service warranty part of this is, again, depending on what's involved in your routine maintenance. Is it once a year? Is it 4 times a year? What's included in that? You know, you'll have a whole separate agreement or contract on that typically. But you know, I might list in here again, if they don't use me, then it will probably void the warranty that I have after the first year. So does that kind of make sense, or do you have any questions? I know I kind of ran through this and jumped around a little. Okay. So here's an example of the manufacturer's warranty from FX Luminaire. This is a two-parter. I was just gonna kind of read through these. I don't know if would that be too boring for you guys at this point, or?
That'd be a lot of words.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of, but I just kind of, let me see if as we read through the free of defects. So like, remember we talked about that expressed warranty. It should be free of defects, material workmanship under normal working order, normal use for a period of 10 years. That's what it says here. And then it continues down. The low voltage lighting fixtures for 3 years from the date of the installation. Hunter extends the warranty to 10 years of installation with both FX fixtures and transformers or controllers being used. So what they're trying to do here in this warranty is if you're only using the fixtures and not their transformer, they're going to give you a lower warranty package. If you
Also,
use
that they specified the date of installation, right? Because like,
yeah, and it's
I don't
based on the date of
I don't really
installation.
carry a lot of inventory, but if you're like a bigger company and you might buy, you know, 500 lights or 100 lights at the start of the season, you could have a light that sits on your shelf for 2 years before it goes out.
Right.
So it's important that it's like not when you purchased it from the supplier.
Right. Date of
It's also
purchase
to
versus
install
date
it.
of installation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a good thing. So that's why on your, make sure you track all that information when you're actually installing. What was the date of installation? Like the date it was ready to fire up and you let it go to the homeowner or whatever the case may be. So, but I wanted to show you here as you're reading through these things. I'm just going to pick out bits and pieces as we just did, but you've got to use their transformer and fixtures. You'll get the 10-year warranty. If you don't, you only get a 3-year warranty on the fixtures. So a little kind of a limitation there. Let's see here. It talks about LED lamps. There's 3 years on their LEDs, it looks like. And then if a defect, let's see. Okay, remember, okay, this is, I wanted to, so it says, if a defect of FXL product is discovered during applicable warranty period, Hunter will repair or replace the product or the defective part at its discretion. Okay, so that terminology there, they have to deem that it's worthy to replace based on whatever other information they have. This warranty does not extend to repairs, adjustments, or replacement of an FX product or parts, blah, blah, blah. Okay, talks about misuse, negligence, alteration, modification, tampering, improper installation. That's a big one. Improper installation. Well, who defines what a proper installation is? Is that based on the guy who installed it, or is it industry standards? And I would tend to go with more of like what's considered industry standards. So be aware of how you're installing these things or having somebody install them. Is it to what is considered normal industry standards? Let's see. Okay, they do not cover, again, like remember we talked about acts of God, that it includes like lightning strikes, electrical power surges, unconditioned power supplies. So that's being protected, the power supply is being protected from surges and things like that. So if you don't have those things in place or documented, then they could say, well, we can't cover that part. I actually had a customer you know, it was pretty blatant, but they had an a lightning strike on a tree behind their property. The tree caught fire, fell down, crashed into another tree, caught fire, and that branch fell down and hit the power line, which then fell and hit one of the copper fixtures, and it blew out the entire system of the all the LEDs were shot and blew a big hole in the back of the transformer. Pretty wild. Again, and his insurance wouldn't cover it because it's considered an act of God. They can't control that. So it cost him a couple $1,000 to get that whole section replaced. All right, continued. Let's see. Okay, so remember the typical verbiage here. It says Hunter's obligation to repair or replace its products set forth, sole and exclusive warranties set forth by Hunter. There are no other warranties expressed or implied. We talked about those, including warranties of merchantability and fitness for a particular purpose. Hunter will not be liable to distributor, blah, blah, blah. So you can see this is where they get into all the legal mumbo jumbo that they put into these contracts. So they basically can almost walk away from anything and not cover it if they wanted. Just, I would say if you're picking a manufacturer to work with, find out what you really can and can't do. And if, again, I was talking to Samuel about this, if you're working with a distributor, a lot of times they have special clout where if you're buying your products from the distributor, they will then take those things back and they'll act as your intermediary with the manufacturer if there's any kind of claims. So that sometimes is a benefit to the contractor or the designer. But just, I think awareness is your biggest asset here is knowing what's going to be covered, what's not, and why. Oh, here's another thing. You know, sometimes they make you jump through hoops. You have to return things within a certain time frame. Like, look at this. You see this last section here? Once the Hunter products are shipped from Hunter, standard policy not to accept returns of new products except for under special conditions. The distributor at its expense may return the product, which are new or unused to Hunter. Well, a lot of times we unpack these products and we try to work with them. We find out they're not functioning. So will they take them back if you've already pulled them out of the box and do all that type of thing? And then or you have to return it in the original box that it was shipped in. You know, what if you pull this stuff out, you install it, you throw all the packing materials away to clean up the project site, right? And then you can't return it in that. Will they exclude it because of that? I don't know. You need a return goods authorization, an RMA number a lot of times. And in this case, there's a minimum restocking fee, 25%. So again, who's held accountable for that if you have a problem? Is it going to be the distributor? Is it going to be you? Again, just understanding these warranties and what's covered, what's not. Are you going to lose money out of it, or how will you be dinged personally? These are the questions to ask yourself and which company you want to work with. And then here, see, restocking fee, return product received within 14 days. Well, is that reasonable for what you're doing in your work? You know, just another question. All right, let's jump to another one. This is Unique Lighting, and they have a little more simplified type of warranty package here. Transformers, they have a limited lifetime warranty for repair or replacement, like we talked. 10-year limited warranty against manufacturing defects. That's the expressed warranty part. Covers all parts and components. Let's see here. And then they start breaking down. You're going to see this on the other ones too. Like, remember I talked about Kichler. They've got so many different products in their catalog that they go through each different product number line, and it can start getting confusing, and then they change the warranty. So like here, Odyssey series fixtures, limited lifetime warranty. Let's see here. The Night series, 15-year limited warranty. Element series, 10-year limited warranty. ISO fixture is a 5-year limited warranty. So knowing what products that you're working with is important, and find out the absolute deal with each one that you have, because that's one of the things I've heard a lot in our industry. I keep reverting back to Kichler because that's where I've heard a lot of these issues. Is like they'll say, oh, we've got a 15-year warranty. Well, when you start looking at the breakdown, there may be a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, depends on which product it is. And is the product made out of brass, or is it made out of aluminum? And the aluminum is going to get the lower warranty. So you have to understand how it all fits together, what the actual warranty truly is for you on the products you're using. Let's see here. It even breaks it down here. Look at it. It's got resin components, powder coating, 5-year limited warranty there. 2-year limited warranty on the Flex Gold series LED lamps versus the other PAR 36, MR16, MR11s are all 5-year. So again, don't just assume when they throw out a number, 5 years, 10 years, lifetime, those are conditional. Depends on what products you're working with. Here's another example, Hadco. They're a big name. They've been around a long time, but you can see all the different, subsidiaries that they have. So like under landscape, Hadco, a 5-year warranty on their LEDs, 1 year on non-LEDs. And then they talk about standard finishes, 10-year warranty on the finish for LED products, 1-year warranty on the finish for all other products. 10 years on the transformer, lifetime limited warranty on all the finish, all cast bronze, stainless steel housing. So again, these fine little details can make a difference. All right, let's go here. Let's go to this is all the Kichler stuff, and this one was kind of interesting to me because it was so long, and I'm like, wow, this is. So here, landscape lighting warranty, the landscape and C series, and then it says a 1-year warranty from date of purchase on all landscape accessories, model number beginning with 15 or 16. Okay. And then you got LED light engines, 15 years, 40,000 hours, whichever comes first. Let's go to the next. Now, Kichler LED light bulbs, model number. Again, remember I talked about look at all these different, the model number. Okay, this one has 6 years or 30,000. This one has 3 years, 15,000 hours. Showcase LEDs, beginning with a 12, only 5 years or 25,000. So again, and then special order, non-cataloged. This could be interesting. If you order a product that's not listed under under these other series, then it only has a 1-year warranty. So remember, they were always touting to everybody 15-year warranty. That's what they're telling the distributors. They're telling all their contractors. There's a huge difference here. Low voltage landscape lighting products, they talk about the exterior housings. Again, look at that. Aluminum housing and exterior finishes 5 years versus the Centennial brass 10 years. 7 years, 5 years, aluminum housing finish. Transformers, 5 years. Standard economy series. You can see how this is breaking down, but see, again, it's very confusing. You have to know what you're working with. This is the interesting part I wanted to explain to you that I thought was, I was looking at this. This warranty does not cover polished brass finishes on the products described above. Okay, this warranty does not cover damage resulting from reasonable wear and tear, voltage of more than 5% above North American standards. I'm going to stop there because if you look over here on the right, it says 5% increase. The North American standards is as follows. The standard testing for all lamps or LEDs, it's always 12.0 volts. So if you go 5% in either, that's 12.6 volts or 11.6 volts if you go under volting. So if it goes outside of that, which a lot of their transformers or the transformers today are from like 11 to 15 volts. Well, I've seen so many guys, they just plug all their cables into the 15-volt outlet, the tap. So now you're getting over 12, 13, 14, 15 volts out at the fixtures. So that's why they were causing a lot of failures on the LEDs in these products, because they're saying here, if it's over 5%, then they won't warranty it. Now, I'm not saying they won't, but it's listed. It could easily walk away from any of the damages that have happened. And there's been a lot. I would say, if you have a good relationship with your distributor or whoever you're buying from, they might be able to get around this. But if they wanted to stick it to you, you could be stuck because that's what's written.
But so my question would be, well, first of all, how do they know? If they asked, wouldn't you just be like, oh yeah, I had it plugged into the 12-volt tap, like, are they gonna send
I
someone
think
out
most people, I think a lot of times they won't say anything. Like if you just say, hey, it failed, they'll just replace it. They don't want to, because they're charging a lot for the fixtures to begin with. So they always factor in failure costs and things like that anyways. But I would say, and I'll tell you an example. There's a couple guys I know that have been doing this for a long time, like way back in the early days. They used to purposely get these fixtures that they knew were problems, and they would order them and then install them, and they'd have failures, and then they make the claim back to the manufacturer saying, oh, it failed. Oh, we'll just send you all new products. So they send all the new products, and they were still charging people. So they were making bucks off of the customers,
Wow.
getting these returns and getting money for installation, everything from the manufacturer. So they were getting taken advantage of. And I think that's why a lot of these guys started putting things like this in there. You won't really know, but what they may do, and I've heard of this before, is they may say, hey, we're going to send one of our reps out to check out the site. They'll come out and they'll look at your site, the installation, to see why the problems happened. And they may be looking for some of this type of stuff. They'll look, all right, oh, he's got everything plugged into the 17-volt tap.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go, oh, well, you went against it says here, they used to teach in the old days, you always wanted to be as close to 12 volts as possible at the fixture. That's why you used a voltmeter, and you would test everything, and you would do all the balancing back of the transformer to make sure that at the fixture you always had around 12 volts, plus or minus. That was always the goal. Nowadays, it's not taught as much because they figure, well, LED's easy, you can run it on anything and it's great. But when you got a situation like this where they're saying, hey, and I've gone to a lot of repairs. I'm just going to be honest. I've had a competitor here in town, big Kitchler guy. He would go out, I'd have to go out and repair a lot of his stuff, and all these fixtures had failed. Well, you look at the transformer and they're getting 14, 15 volts at the fixture. So they were burning up the LEDs, is what was happening. So it would kill the whole fixture, and those were all the integrated. So you'd have to replace the whole fixture.
Yeah. So do you avoid, do you avoid using anything other than the 12, or, how do you balance that with not getting voltage drop at the end of the chain?
Well, depending on the transformer you're working with, a lot of I don't know, I guess a lot. There's several transformers that have like an 11-volt tap. And most of the time you're not sending voltage out to fixtures that are only 5 feet away or 10 feet away, where you're going to have, maybe you jump over the 12 and a half, whatever it is. Okay. At the fixture. But there's ways when you're going longer distance, or you add, let's say 10 lights, LEDs onto one run. Typically you'll have voltage drop at that junction point or whatever, depending on how you wire the system. Let's say you have a hub system where you have a main feed going out to a junction box, and then it branches out to those fixtures. Let's say you have 10 lights. Then the voltage should drop from the transformer to that hub or that junction point because of the load that's on it. So what you can do is then you can adjust at the transformer. Okay, if let's say it's reading 10 volts at the junction, then you can bump it up 2 volts inside the transformer. So let's say it's on the 12, maybe you're up to the 14-volt tap now in the transformer, but by the time it gets to the fixtures, it's only at 12. So that's where knowing how to work the system or adding fixtures, or maybe it's using a lower gauge cable, a smaller gauge, that'll have increased voltage drop. Versus a heavier gauge cable will lessen voltage drop. Does that make sense? Like if you use, instead of a 12 gauge, maybe you use a 10 gauge, you're going to have less voltage drop because it's a heavier thickness of copper feeding the system.
I mean, also different fixtures will have different tolerances, right? Like, I mean, I was just looking now on the Sterling website, like their fixtures say they're rated for 9 volts up to 15 volts.
Correct.
Okay.
And a lot of the fixtures are like that nowadays, or the LEDs. You have a pretty broad range, 9 to 18, 9 to 22, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But again, I think like just know what the company you're working with, what it says on the products. You know, especially if it's your first time using them, read into it. But what are the limitations on how much voltage can I feed these? And then knowing these warranties like this, if it only says 5%, that means you can only go to 12.6 legally at the fixture before, if there's a potential problem and they don't want to cover it, then you could say, well, it's within the range, the 5% range, and then they have to cover it. I mean, legally, I'm giving you worst case scenarios, but it's just.
Well, do you think if you call up Kitchell, they're not going to bust your balls about a bulb, right?
Right.
Like
I said, they're charging so much anyway, so they've already accounted for loss. So, I think you just have to be a heavy repeat offender. If it's happening all the time to you and you keep calling them up, and they're going to be going, well, what's going on with this guy?
Yeah.
Why is he having failures on all these jobs?
Well, and this isn't I guess part of this too for me is that obviously it'd be great to keep everything in warranty, but it's also just good, a good like check on, the work I'd be doing, so I guess like, is it something that, do you take readings? Do you take a voltmeter, I mean, maybe not to every single fixture, but do you kind of take one, maybe to the first fixture and the last? Is that something to kind of build a good
I mean, everybody's different on that. And in the old days, when we were working with halogen, we used to have to do that on everything because it was that important. We'd have a lot of voltage drop in the old days. Nowadays, it's, you almost don't even have to take a reading because you're more or less going to be within the range, for the most part, depending on how you're wiring things. But I would to say I like to run a hub system, like a main feed out to a junction point, and then I'll pull all my fixtures or a bank, 5 to 10 lights, whatever it is, into that hub. So then I can check at the hub, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's 12.3. Okay, I'm fine, not a problem. It'll drop a little bit maybe by the time it gets to the fixture, depending on how far away the fixture is from the hub. But it's, that's, again, if you're that close, it really won't matter too much.
Okay.
There are some guys like that are real critical about it. And that's the more critical you are, the better. I mean, if you now you've got a super high performing system and you can say dead on, oh, I know exactly all the voltage, you've got it all logged and I used to have a chart. I would log all my voltage readings, my amp readings, everything. So I keep that in my file as part of my documentation. That way, if I ever had a problem, I could say, oh, well, this hub has this many lights on it. Here's the amp draw on it. Here's the voltage. Here's how many watts are on that hub. It's good as a designer to have that kind of detail, but not a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
It takes
Well,
time.
and that was I didn't want to ask till we got through the presentation here, but that is
Yeah.
definitely some of the questions I'm having is what level of documentation, like you said, like I mean, even from keeping the box that it came in
Yeah.
to the paperwork that you pull out of every single one, and what I was trying to understand if the paperwork here has a serial number that matches to the fixture in any way. What's to say that something's just out of warranty and you don't just pull one off a newer one that you used, and and that's what I like. Yeah, I mean, I'd have for one job, you get a ton of paperwork. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
figure out what's worth keeping, what is it,
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's kind of where my head's spinning with that stuff a little bit. And yeah.
Well, I think in the beginning, as you're learning and developing, I would say I would keep at least one set of the paperwork so that you have reference to what's going on. But as
Mhm.
you get more and more familiar with doing it, you're just gonna find a lot of it's like they'll give you installation instructions. You don't need that. If you've been doing it a while, you already know how to install it.
Yeah, every single
It
one
doesn't
comes.
matter. But like sometimes, like I like to give my customers like maybe the little pamphlet that not on the fixtures so much, but on the transformer. Like I
Mm.
say, here's your, the product manual or the manufacturer gives you on the transformer. Because they might need to know, well, how do I turn it off? How do I unplug it? There's some basic information in there
Mhm.
that might be good for them. And then it makes them feel like, oh, I'll put that in my file so that I've got, and then it may even talk about warranties in that package.
Okay.
So, but you don't need to give them everything. And I
Yeah.
don't think you need to keep everything. And once you get familiar with the system and the products, then you don't need to keep any of that. You can always get it online or call the company if you need it.
Okay, yeah, and then also, you guys kind of mentioned it here. I mean, do you have any kind of a spreadsheet that says, like because I've even seen it within some of the language we've gone over that some of them do say from date of purchase. So if you were stockpiling a few things, is it is that something you would have a spreadsheet with? Here's the day I purchased it, it arrived, and here's the day it got installed on the job, and what job, is that just too much headache to keep up with that, or is that important to have?
Dan, you want to say anything on it, or I mean, I'll
I
give
mean,
him.
I'll say so. I personally I don't operate at that size of project or that like quantity of work that it would be important. What I will say is, for a while I did work for a company that did or that used to. And I'll say two things. One, at a certain size, it's important, right? I mean, they were one of the larger landscape lighting companies on Long Island. So they'd been around for decades. So they
Mm,
had their documentation was like, there was like, it was actually pretty cool to go through because they had, all the hand drawn drawings going back to like the 70s
uh,
of installations.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
on the business side, some of that stuff becomes important because your inventory and you're counting against your gross and your net and your loss and like how you're
mm,
holding, how much inventory you're holding, like affects stuff like that. Um, One thing I would say also is that like probably what would be good advice for both of us is to get into the habit of doing it when you're small, right? So like when you're doing small and you're doing, a couple jobs a month and you're, maybe you have 3 lights sitting on the shelf in between or whatever, but like you put those processes into place so that, when
mm.
all of a sudden you're huge and you've got, you're doing 3 jobs a week and you've got a warehouse full of fixtures, then you're, oh man, I need a way to keep track of this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
put those processes in early
Yeah.
and then
Mm.
you know, it's easier to scale it than to, because I remember doing inventory there and it would just be like, all right, I've got one Phillips par 36. I've got one Sylvania par 36. I've got,
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it all depends on how detailed you want to get and what your service provides. Um, I think with let's see here. I would also talk to your, like, remember I was saying about talking to the distributor. If you're buying all your products from one place, talk to them about that with the data purchase issue, because that
Yeah.
is a question. A lot of times I've opened up inventory or products and you'll see right on it's dated on the LED or on the box and it'll say a date that was maybe from last year. So how
Mhm.
are they if they say it's a 5-year warranty? Now,
Yeah.
did I lose a year because it's dated that on this product, even though it hasn't been installed yet? So I would, it might be a good idea to document that what it was when you purchased it and then when it was installed, so then that way you have a reference. But by talking to the distributor about that, say, hey, are you going to hold me accountable on this if I have the date of installation shown on here and this is the products I'm working with, are you going to still cover it? And most of the time I think they'll say, oh yeah, no, don't worry about that, we'll got you covered.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, but even on here, it says, warranty claims, returning products. It talks about proof of purchase, the original sales receipt. I would keep all that information so that you have record or document that in there,
Mhm.
especially with LEDs to show that, okay, here's when I bought it. So then that way they can look back in their records because they're going to ask you for that information anyways. When did you buy this? And you're gonna
Yeah.
have to dig up all that information anyways. If you just put it in your file or have some sort of a little chart that
Yeah.
talks about those things,
And
then that
also,
way,
like, all of
yeah,
our purchasing is done. I mean, I shouldn't say all, but most of it's done in some capacity online, right?
yeah,
Whether it's you're purchasing it from a manufacturer website like
Mhm.
Sterling or even or one of the people who sells direct to, or you're emailing your distributor being like, hey, can I get pricing on this? And they're emailing you back an invoice, or you're emailing,
Yeah.
whatever, one of the other companies that, they don't, you can't order it online, but you just send the email to their rep and they're like, hey, I need 6 of these, 6 of these, 6 of these. And you can, it's in the cloud somewhere. You find it in your email, you find it in the
Yeah.
website.
Yeah. I've had all my emails or all my purchases, like the distributor actually knows that just if I get something, just send me an email with it so I have it, because
Yeah.
it saves time, scanning things in anyways. But then there's always that trail. So I'll keep doing
Yeah.
that.
good, good. Yeah, no, it's a good practice. And again, I do everything in-house myself. I'm the only guy now. I used to have a team, but I don't anymore. So it's, there's only so much information you're gonna want to try to retain without spending hours and hours on end doing for what is it worthwhile to are you making money from it? But it looks good if you have your records kept to where you know what you're doing. It'll make
Mhm.
you look more professional. So I thought this was interesting here. Look at this last comment, this bullet point. It says certain acid loving plants, and it talks about like pine trees, whatever, should not be exposed to light of any kind more than 18 hours. If a plant should die or burn because of being exposed to the continuous light, the cost of damage from the plant it's not covered under the warranty. So they've even included that in there. That was kind of
There's,
interesting.
there's a story behind that. Someone tried to get them to uh,
Yeah, I'm sure. He said,
cover
if you
him.
burned up all our plants, you need to replace that cost. Yeah. So interesting. So that's it. Oops, on the slides there. Let me get out of this. We'll come back to our screen. All right. Um, we can just continue if you have questions or thoughts or things that you want to talk about as it relates to this. Let's run through it.
Hmm.
Do you have any other questions, Sam?
Let me. We can go to Dan for a minute, but I think either you covered most everything, or in that
Okay.
last little sprint there, I kind of covered the thoughts in my head. But yeah, I mean, yeah. Anyways, you can go to Dan.
Okay.
So something that I sort of philosophically wonder about with warranties, and I've had conversations with clients about it too, is at what point, right? So, for instance, like Amp, right, who's like one of the more affordable companies.
Yeah.
One of the big selling points is that they offer a lifetime warranty. Also, I always go back to, I don't know, the scene from Tommy Boy. The guarantee is right on the box. I can put my head up a butcher's ass. But the idea that, like, at what point is a warranty, like, is it that they're standing behind their product, or is that their products are so cheap for them to make that they don't care, and you say whatever and they'll throw it in the trash and send you a new one because it costs them 7 cents.
Yeah.
So that it's like, I know, again, I've had conversations with clients like, well, like, yeah, sure, like they offer you a lifetime warranty, but what that means is that they don't care. It's so cheap for them, so it's like, that's not always the testament of the quality. It's a testament to the
right.
of the product.
No, that's a great point. And I think another good point to add to that is that think of it from the customer's perspective. If you were buying something and you had problems, would you expect your contractor or designer or the products, would you expect them to cover that? And I would hope that, I know with how I treat my customers, I want to do as much as I can do for them so that they continue to keep their trust in me and know that I will stand behind what I did and I will take care of them no matter what, type of thing. Because I've always been that way, and I think that's why I have such great relationships with well, all my past customers. So I think you have to weigh that as, do you want to get real critical just to save a couple bucks, or just replace it, and then you can make the decision with the distributor or the manufacturer on your own. Like, I always take care of my customer, and then I'll deal with that on the side. And then that way I keep that relationship intact, and they're happy, everything's great, right? And then if I continue to have problems, let's say with the manufacturer or the distributor, then I may go, you know what, if you guys aren't willing to stand behind this or do this and that, then I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to use another product, or I'm going to do whatever. I try to take that ground for myself, but I think you have to kind of weigh it, even though we're talking all these legal terms and what's for protection and such. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
At the
always
end of
go
the day,
back to the customer. That's how I kind of.
It's like, what is it? What's the real cost of installing? You swap out, you eat the price of the labor, even if you have to eat the price of the fixture to swap out a fixture that failed, and that's a good relationship, and that's always the chance to be like, oh, so since I'm here, like, let's talk about your backyard,
Right.
or just staying in their good graces, because like landscape lighting people are always like, thinking about the next thing. So
absolutely.
Well, I guess like I said, just to kind of close the loop in my brain here, since I've never had to invoke a warranty on any of this stuff, if let's say, someone's fixture goes out, and if I have my original receipt, the contract I signed with the client, and then I, send back the fixture, but I don't have the box or something, right? What are the odds that, and it's, within the, the specifications for that product line or whatever, is that gonna get, I mean, if that gets me through 95% of the cases, then in my opinion, it's not really worth, trying to deal with keeping individual pieces of paper or doing anything. Does that seem like a relatively safe manner of going about?
Absolutely.
They're not going to make
you can't keep hundreds of empty boxes around.
No.
Just in case you have to ship something back. I mean, what I've found is a lot of times what they'll do, especially ones with better customer service, is they'll ship you the new one and they say ship the old one back in the box that the new one came in. And it's maybe the RMA, so it's like they have like the official paperwork on it, so that they know that you talk to them, you give them the serial number or whatever, and they And I've never had someone give me a hard time about a warranty from a manufacturer. Like, they're usually, I mean, they just like we want to keep our customers happy, they want to keep us happy, so they're like they're eager to move it through quickly, and Yeah.
Okay. And the last question there would be, do you go directly to Kitchler or do you go to your distributor and say, can you deal with this? You know, because that'd be great if next time you were stopping in there, you could say, hey, I mean, how does that work?
I think it depends on how it's set up from the manufacturer to, to get it to you. Is it through a distribution channel, which most of them are? Then I would say go to the distributor. That
Okay.
should be your first stop because they're representing the manufacturer and therefore they've already worked all these issues out in advance where they take it back and they'll give you a new one off the shelf or whatever the
Yeah. So
case
with any
may be.
luck, they have one right there. They can just.
Yeah, right. And then they'll deal with all the other garbage, the RMAs between them and again, that's the benefit if you have a relationship with the distributor in this case, or if it's a manufacturer that sells direct. Like I work with Clarelux a lot of, most of the time, so they sell direct to me. So if I ever have, I just tell them what's going on. They'll send a new one, they'll send the RMA or whatever, and then I just swap if there's a problem.
Okay.
So that's how it should. Yeah, you shouldn't have to go to the manufacturer in most cases.
Cool.
Yeah. So, all right. I know it was a little dry, but hopefully I answered a lot of questions and maybe it makes a little more sense now when you hear the term, implied versus express, limited versus full warranties, contractor versus manufacturer warranties. It's not that
Yeah.
hard, but it's just most people don't take the time to read or to really like look into it and consider how does this affect me? How does this affect my customer?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way you should look at it. So, all
Cool.
right.
Cool.
Well, thank you
Awesome.
guys. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you maybe on Monday with the other one.
Yeah, I'll be here. I'll be here on Monday.
Okay.
Which one? What is it on Monday?
That's design tools. It'll be kind of an overview, basic design tools that you might want to use when you're out sketching and doing things on job sites.
I might have to catch the record for that one. That's
Okay.
my wife's birthday, so I'll be
Oh,
occupied. Hopefully, I won't be here, or else
all right.
something's gone terribly wrong. All right, bye guys.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.